This happened a few months ago. I had been working on rebuilding my mental health after some difficult times trying to regain my sense of balance. I found a place of worship that was welcoming, and it became a refuge for me. One evening, there was a young people's event, a casual gathering where I met some great people and had a good time. The night carried on until around 1 a.m., and as the event started to wind down, I found myself heading upstairs. I met a man named Tobias while I was there, someone who looked to be in his late 30s. He was friendly but also quite forward. He complimented me on my appearance and asked about my sexuality. I got the sense that he was interested, but I wasn't. Still, I thought being polite and not engaging in his flirtations would make it clear that I wasn't interested. A little while later, I went downstairs to throw something away, and Tobias followed. He kissed me when we were alone. I pulled back and told him I wasn't available, but he just brushed it off, even showing me his wedding ring as if it was nothing. I tried to laugh it off and distance myself, assuming that would be the end of it. When I decided to head home, I planned to walk a friend to the station first. Tobias noticed I was leaving and decided to tag along, despite me making it clear I was going straight home afterward. As we walked, my friend mentioned wanting to grab another drink. Tobias joined us, continuing to make me uncomfortable with his behavior. He was complimenting me nonstop, touching my neck and back, and trying to kiss me again. I kept finding ways to avoid it, but he wasn't backing off. He commented on some marks on my neck, making inappropriate comparisons about them, and seemed to enjoy pushing boundaries. Each time he kissed me, I would pull away, trying to make it clear without making a scene. I even made excuses about why I wasn't interested, but none of it seemed to register with him. We eventually found ourselves sitting on a bench, my friend next to me, while Tobias hovered nearby. He complained about not sitting next to me, but I brushed it off. He kept creeping closer, touching my knees, trying to kiss me again. His persistence was unnerving, but I didn't want to cause a scene. When I revealed that I was transgender, hoping it would make him back off, he only seemed more interested, making even more inappropriate comments. At this point, I felt trapped. He wasn't taking any hint I gave, no matter how blunt. I managed to step away for a moment, calling a friend and explaining what was happening. Talking through it helped me realize just how wrong this situation was, and I knew I needed to get out of there. When I returned, Tobias immediately tried to kiss me again, telling me he was worried and had been looking for me. I told him I was going home and that I wasn't comfortable with what had been happening. He acted confused, as if he didn't understand why I was uncomfortable. He even asked me for one last kiss, and I refused. Then he tried to hug me, but I pushed him away, telling him no. He became defensive, saying I was making him feel uncomfortable now, twisting the situation back onto me. It was clear by then that nothing I said was going to get through to him. He kept insisting he was sober, trying to rationalize his behavior and make it seem like I was the one overreacting. When I stood up to leave, he was still there, barely a foot away from me, trying to figure out what had changed and why I was rejecting him. I didn't bother explaining anymore. I walked away, leaving my friend to deal with him as I headed home. The next day, I reported the incident to the security team at my place of worship. Tobias was banned from returning, and I haven't seen him since. The first time I went to college, I got placed in a philosophy class with a teacher who seemed to enjoy pushing the religious buttons of my classmates. I wasn't a fan of it. I was 17, going on 18, raised Christian, but had attended Catholic school. In that class, I bonded with a girl who was about my age and an older student who was 29. It was my first semester, and overall, things were going well. A small group of us, including this guy and a few others, would sit in the grass after class, talking and doing homework. We'd go on about the kinds of things 18-year-olds like to think are deep. Looking back, I should have questioned why a guy nearing 30 was so interested in hanging out with us. But at the time, I thought I was fascinating and exciting, though in reality I was just being naive. About halfway through the semester, he mentioned that it was his birthday weekend. He invited me and the other girl to celebrate with him. I hadn't done much partying at that point, mostly because dirty college basements didn't appeal to me, but this seemed different. It sounded nice, just the three of us, hanging out and sharing a drink. We all agreed to meet up at a halfway point between school and his place and walk the rest of the way together. An hour before we were supposed to meet, I called him to check in. He seemed in a good mood, happy that I was still coming. But something felt off. He sounded a bit strange, and I could hear other male voices in the background, more than I expected. It sounded like there were quite a few guys at his house. When I asked about it, he brushed it off, saying, "Oh, just some of my boys hanging out." That didn't sit right with me. This wasn't supposed to be a party. It was just supposed to be the three of us. Right then, I made the decision not to go. I told him I wasn't feeling well and that I had to cancel. After hanging up, I texted the other girl, telling her I wasn't going and warning her that there were a lot of guys at his place. I asked her to be careful. After that night, I never saw or heard from her again. She dropped out of school almost immediately, and the guy disappeared too. It wasn't long before I learned the truth about him and his friends. They weren't just some rowdy college guys, they were predators. Not your typical college partiers either. They were behind a series of assaults that had been happening on and around our campus for over a year. They had been grooming freshman girls, some not even 18 yet. This guy had spent 2 months gaining our trust, all with the goal of luring me to a house full of men. The silver lining is that they didn't get away with it. Many of them were arrested after girls on campus started speaking up, and the guy who had invited me to his party was eventually caught in another state on an outstanding warrant. But it still chills me to think how close I came to making a decision that could have changed my life in the worst possible way. When I was 18, I had just started college and moved far from my hometown, eager for space and independence. It felt like the first few weeks were a whirlwind of people trying to make friends, and I was part of that rush. One of those friends I made early on was a girl named Kelsey. She was tall, pretty, and we shared a lot of interests. So when she invited me to a house party a few weeks into the semester, I jumped at the chance. I had been drinking since I was 15 and knew all the drinking games, so I figured it'd be fun. It was a blistering summer in the Midwest, 90 degrees and humid. I didn't bother with makeup or doing much with my hair. In that heat, it would have melted off anyway. I showed up in shorts and a tank top ready for a good time. The house was a 2-story place in a rough part of town. Music was blaring so loud the windows rattled, and people were crammed in every corner. The heat inside was unbearable, like stepping into an oven. The air conditioning was either broken or turned off, and the front and back doors were propped open. But no breeze came through. It was already a bad scene, and I was about to leave when Kelsey appeared, grabbing my wrist and pulling me inside. The party was in full swing, beer pong, sweaty bodies dancing, people trying to have fun in the heat. The beer was free for girls, so I took advantage of that. After a few rounds of beer pong, things started to feel off. Around midnight, I noticed a tall, thin guy hovering around me. I assumed he was one of Kelsey's friends. He was forgettable in appearance, dark hair, dark eyes, a ratty white shirt, and basketball shorts. He looked like half the other guys at the party. After a while, I decided I needed some air. I stepped outside, and even though it was still hot, it was better than being inside. I waited for Kelsey to join me after using the bathroom. I turned around and nearly walked straight into the tall guy. Up close, he was even taller, probably around 6 feet 4 inches, and he reeked of weed, beer, and sweat. I took a step back, ready to tell him off. But before I could, he stared at my chest and made a comment that caught me off guard. It wasn't flirty. It was just weird. I tried to brush him off, assuming it was just a terrible attempt at a pickup line. But then he said something that sent a chill down my spine. He told me he'd been watching me all night. I asked if he was looking for Kelsey, trying to change the subject, but he had no idea who she was. That's when I realized he'd been stalking me at the party, watching me the whole time. I tried to walk away, but he grabbed my wrist, hard enough to hurt. I pulled back, but he didn't let go. I had dealt with enough growing up with my 6 brothers and an abusive father, so I wasn't going to let this guy drag me away without a fight. He started pulling me down the street, muttering disgusting things under his breath about what he planned to do to me. I was furious, but I didn't panic. I squirmed, kicked, and screamed, refusing to make it easy for him. He grabbed my hair, but that just made me angrier, and I bit him as hard as I could. I tasted blood and punched him in the face, which gave me just enough time to wrench my arm free. He tried to hit me, but the adrenaline had kicked in, and I didn't feel a thing. All I cared about was getting away. Suddenly, Kelsey and another guy from the party appeared. Kelsey grabbed me, pulling me away from the guy while the other guy held him down. The next few minutes were a blur. I remember being taken back to the porch, someone handing me water and wiping blood, his blood, from my chin. He managed to get away. No one called the cops, and neither did I. I was underage and had been drinking. It was a stupid situation that could have ended badly. Afterward, I realized Kelsey wasn't the friend I thought she was. She blamed me for what had happened, saying I must have led him on by walking outside with him. I found out later the guy's name was Jordan, and he dropped out of college shortly after the incident. Years later, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw Kelsey's name pop up in the suggested friends list. Out of curiosity, I clicked on her profile, and there she was, married to Jordan, with 2 kids. I wasn't surprised when I heard she'd gotten into drugs and was with a total loser. She even messaged me a few times, trying to explain why Jordan had acted the way he did, defending him. I didn't care to respond. Looking back, it's just a memory of 2 people I never want to see again. Creepy Jordan and Kelsey, the so-called friend who turned out to be anything but. Let's hope our paths never cross again, for their sake. I had a strange feeling as I sat on the beach during my vacation with my boyfriend, Jake, and his sister Mia. The sun had just set, and the night was full of laughter and music from the food stalls. It was busy, but something about it made me uneasy. Jake and Mia had started talking to a group of teenagers nearby. They were mostly Italian and seemed friendly, excited by our English accents. I stayed quiet, feeling shy and anxious. After some time, one of the older guys in the group, who looked around 21 or 22, said they were going to a party. The others cheered, and a car pulled up, ready to take them. I wasn't sure about going, but Jake and Mia wanted to. I thought there'd be lots of people there, and maybe it would be fun. I followed them even though my gut told me to stay put. The older guy, Luca, offered to show us the way. We walked down quiet streets, away from the lively sounds of the beach. It felt strange, like we were going the wrong way. After 10 minutes, he started looking around, confused. This didn't feel right. Eventually, he stopped in front of an old apartment building. It looked abandoned, with paint peeling off the walls and a rusty gate. My heart started to race, and I tried to push away the thoughts creeping into my mind. I told myself it was just a shortcut. Luca led us into a small, creaky elevator, The door shut tight and it jerked as it moved up. The silence was heavy. I felt something cold crawl down my spine. When the doors opened, we stepped into a dim hallway. The only light came from a flickering bulb overhead. There were 5 doors, and I couldn't hear anything. No music, no laughter, just silence. I wanted to leave. I pulled on Jake's arm, trying to get his attention, but he seemed calm. I didn't understand why. Luca had grown quiet, mumbling to himself as he walked ahead. I watched him lead us to a door at the end of the hall. It opened to a balcony with astroturf and scattered lawn chairs. The place was a dump with bottles and cigarette butts everywhere. Luca smiled at us, but it felt wrong. The way he looked at me made me want to scream. He said he would get his friends, and I could feel danger lurking behind that smile. I watched him walk away and knew we had to get out. I turned to Jake and Mia, whispering that we needed to leave. They nodded, and we quickly formed a plan. We decided to run for the door. Luca went into another room, and we knew this was our chance. We bolted down the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear voices getting louder behind us, growing closer. Jake fumbled with the locks on the door, his hands shaking. The noise from the other room filled the air, a mix of laughter and shouting that sent chills down my spine. As Jake finally opened the door, we dashed down the stairs, my legs moving faster than I thought possible. I felt the cool night air hit my face when we burst out of the building. We ran past dark corners and shadowy alleys, not stopping until we reached the safety of our hotel. I couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. I wondered what Luca and his friends had planned for us. What if they had intended to trap us? I was grateful we had escaped, but I knew I would never forget that night. Somewhere in that dark apartment, the laughter echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of how quickly fun can turn into fear. I promised myself to always trust my instincts from now on, especially when something felt off. This happened several years ago when I was in middle school. I received an invitation to my best friend's little sister's birthday party, as she had chosen me as her one allowed guest. My family dropped me off and headed to a family reunion I wasn't interested in attending. Despite my close friendship with my best friend, her family and their friends had a reputation for being a bit rough around the edges. Growing up in the South, I wasn't shocked, but it made me feel out of place. Other than my friend, her mom and stepdad, and her little sister, I didn't know anyone at the party. Her parents had a few friends over, along with some other random family members. After getting dropped off, I walked inside with my friend. She mentioned they were setting up a kiddie pool for her little sister in the front yard. She suggested I help watch the kids and join her in the pool. I hadn't brought my own swimsuit, so she offered one of hers. I agreed, as it was a scorching hot day and there wasn't much else for us to do. I picked out a bikini that was slightly big, and her mom helped me tighten the strings. Once we were ready, we all headed outside. They set up the pool, and everyone settled into lawn chairs or the water. The kiddie pool was one of those inflatable ones, about 8 feet long and barely 2 feet deep. I ended up walking around it with a pool net, scooping out leaves that fell in. My friend sat in the water, and we chatted while the adults mingled. I noticed one of the adults looked a bit creepy, but I brushed it off, focusing on my friend instead. After a while, we went back inside the house. One of the older ladies pulled me aside and expressed her concern. She told me not to worry, but she wanted to share something alarming. The creepy-looking guy had taken pictures of me with his phone while I was in the pool. The lady confronted him when she noticed, and he claimed to have deleted all the pictures. However, she didn't believe him. When he wasn't looking, she took his phone and actually deleted them for real. She explained that he might have intended to show those pictures to his friends to brag about having seen me. At the time, I was still in middle school, and had always looked younger than my age. This revelation terrified me, but I decided not to tell my parents, fearing they would never let me return to my friend's house again. To this day, they remain unaware of what happened. Later, my friend mentioned that her stepdad had a serious conversation with his friend about the incident. It seemed he had reached a breaking point with this behavior and cut him off. I often find myself wondering what compelled him to take pictures of me and what could have happened if the lady hadn't seen him. Part of me believes he took the pictures simply because I was in a bikini and was one of the only young girls there who wasn't a small child. The thought of what he could have done with those photos sends a chill down my spine. I also think about what he might have done if there hadn't been so many people around. The memory lingers, and I remind myself to steer clear of anyone who crosses boundaries and makes me feel uncomfortable. Creepy photographer. Let's never meet again.